Welcome Exiles to my final update on the Righteous Fire Inquisitor. This build had a lot of great things going for it. We could cruise through maps with no issues at all. Out and go, didn't matter the mods, no regen, minus max, less recovery rate, we did it all. It was a good time. Mapping was fantastic. Boss fights, they were pretty good. Inquisitor's probably better at boss fights than Trickster, but Trickster could hold its own. I would say Trickster ends up having maybe a little bit less damage than Inquisitor, I believe. I mean, I can't really judge it given I didn't min-max this Trickster quite as much as I did with the Inquisitor from last league, and there was a lot of changes between this league and last league, but I think overall, I believe Trickster's a little bit less DPS than Inquisitor if I was just going to give a rough guesstimate on it after playing it. Overall, it felt pretty good. We were able to take down the Feared, all the endgame bosses. Most of them we could do deathless. Feared I think we did with a couple deaths. I did Feared twice. The first time I did it with 1 death. The second time I did it with 6 deaths because I bricked it and then there was a trade in the middle. Not 6 deaths, so I had to like teleport out to get the trade. And I butchered it. Anyways, point is you can definitely brick a Feared. It's not an easy fight, and I wasn't even running it with rare. It was just kind of a basic magic Feared with mods that weren't detrimental to us, and that's what we're going to showcase here is the one where I did with 1 death at the end here. And all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. Overall, I would say it's a bit too expensive in my opinion for the results you get. That being said, it was a very clean farming, just run maps, felt good. I got all the way to level 97 just on Alk and Go on random red maps, didn't matter the mods, and it was fine. It felt great. Now let's go in game, and I want to go over the specifics of the character. Now that we're in game, let's talk the setup of the character. It was the idea to use Esh's Visage, which recently got buffed this patch, that would allow us to go in Energy Shield based Righteous Fire. It would make it so damage doesn't bypass our Energy Shield if we were above low life condition. Previously, this had to be above low mana as well, which made it pretty rough on your auras. Now we could reserve our full mana pool, get some decent auras going, especially with the new aura efficiency nodes. It works out great. So this would allow us to use something besides a Shavron's Wrapping or a chest piece, and ideally Shadow Stitch. It just works so well with Trickster, and that's what we were going for here. We ended up with about 11.5k energy shield. I still have 1, 2, 3, 4 items I technically could corrupt. Probably would take me close to 12.5k if I corrupted those. If I rolled a little bit better belts, a little bit better rings, we probably could get to close to 13k energy shield, maybe even 14k if we're really min-maxing. So it feels very good in terms of the tankiness level with Shadow Stitch, with getting min-maxing your gear, stuff like that feels good, and there's a lot of power potential there. Now that being said, when it comes to the Trickster, part of the reason I'm not necessarily going to recommend this or make a full guide out of this is because of the transition between life base to energy shield base. There's this big gap here that requires a decent amount of gearing to even get the energy shield base build running, like getting a Shadow Stitch, like getting Esh's Visage, like getting just general good ES gear on most of your gear slots, stuff like that. That gap's too big in my opinion. I think it would make a bad guide, because if I say, hey, this is a build guide I recommend, and then there's 100 people that are trying to make that transition, I think there's a lot of people that are going to have a hard time with that, and I just don't want to recommend something that might leave some people left out to dry when trying to make that transition and end up having a really bad experience. So for that reason, I'm not recommending the Trickster. Ultimately, I believe the Inquisitor is a better Ascendancy. I think it's a bit better damage-wise, and the consistent sustain between both mapping and bossing, I think overall is a better pick with Inquisitor, so that's what I'm still going to recommend. That's still what I'm going to suggest to you guys, especially with the smooth transition of gear pieces. I feel like Inquisitor has a good line of like upgrades that all just kind of work together linearly and not some giant gap you have to jump over. Speaking of the gear, I have basically 1 really good piece, which is my helmet and Shadow Stitch, and then everything else I think is just kind of meh. No, not meh. That's not true. My scepter's pretty good. I have a fairly decent rings, fairly decent gloves. I'd say actually overall our gear is pretty solid. In the end, this level of gear, getting Awakened 5 gems, getting a level 21 Valor F, stuff like this felt very necessary to get the damage to do a fight like the Feared. I think if I take away the 21 Valor F, I take away level 5 Awakened gems, I lose 3 gem levels on my RF. I don't think I'll have enough damage to do the feared. So stuff like that I think is very mandatory to start getting the damage numbers to take RF to doing the hardest endgame content like the feared. Speaking of which, if you want to make a Val Righteous Fire level 21, I have made a couple of these. Basically, it's a huge grind in doing Doriani's Institute Corruption Chambers in the Temple. I have done like 40 of those corrupts, and I think I've gotten 3 21/20s on Val RF. I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. But that's about how many times I've corrupted gems, and obviously that's a huge grind if you're going to do on average 13 Dorianis. That's a lot of temples to run, stuff like that. Keep in mind, if you're going to do that grind, that's what you're going to be expecting there to make yourself a Val RF. Overall, pretty happy with the character. It feels very good because we have a bunch of evasion thanks to stacking some of these aura efficiency nodes, mixing it in with Trickster, getting a lot of percent evasion on all the small nodes, and then mixing in ghost shrouds. We end up getting about 40k evasion, which means every time an enemy hits us with a ghost shroud, we get another like 1200 ES back. That's a very nice buffer of EHP we have on our build that feels good, some extra sustain via that. And then later on, eventually, I think it'd be worth to get a Watcher's Eye with +% chance to evade. Right now, we have 83% chance to evade attacks. If we get a Watcher's Eye, which can roll up to like 8% chance to evade, that's like another... That's like blind, basically. If there's a 20% chance for an enemy to hit you and you cut that number in half, that's like blind in terms of power level of what that would do to our evading enemies' attacks. So that would feel very good. Along with getting that mod with dot multi, it would be like the GG Watcher's Eye, obviously. For large clusters, we crafted this via going for 2 notables and then using Leo slams. So I would get like Widespread and Burning Bright, and then I would go for a Leo slam. Or I'd get Prismatic and Burning Bright, and I'd go for a Leo slam. And I just kept doing that. I think I did that maybe 6 or 7 or 8 times till I got a 3rd notable. But the idea is best in slot, best case scenario is Burning Bright and Prismatic Heart on the travel notice for RF. That ends up feeling very good if you can min-max there. I'm trying to think other min-maxing things we do. Oh yeah, Fractured Jewels. The best way to make Righteous Fire best in slot Fractured Jewels is percent energy shield, or if you're going for life base with Inquisitor or something like that, percent life base fracture. And then what you do is you craft with Scourge fossils or with Reforged Fire, more common, until you hit Fire, Burning, and Fire dot multi, or do double damage plus a defensive affix like I hit Chaos Res, which I thought was pretty useful for me because I wanted to get a decent amount of Chaos Res to feel good against that sort of damage. And so that's a good way to craft yourself jewels. It is going to be a lot less expensive than trying to just craft a jewel without the fractured mod. So definitely look into getting that. If you can get some nice fractured jewels to work with, I would recommend it. I think what other things I should go over. Defenses, Pantheon wise, we go for Soul of Aracali for the reduced damage taken and the recover 20% recovery rate if you've stopped taking damage over time recently. This works great with the Heartstopper node, since whenever we get that activated, we get a big boost of recovery rate, feels very good. Eventually, you'd want to get the Chaos Res against damage over time. That would help out if you didn't have quite capped Chaos Res against things like poisons. It would be very good for that. And then we have Tukohama, so that way, when we're fighting bosses, we can kind of sit still and face tank, get an extra 9% Fizz reduction and 2% regen. Feels very good, and I like having that there. Another thing we ended up going for is a replica, a Fragile Bloom. This with Corrupted Blood wasn't too expensive, and since we have 40k evasion, we don't get hit too often. It actually synergizes quite well with Fragile Bloom. You'll see at the initial clips of this video, I showcased me just standing in a Shaper Beam. That's because Fragile Bloom is giving us 7% regen. That helps us get there. Ideally, for boot and chance, you'd eventually want to get regen instead of movement speed. I just ran a couple Gift to the Goddess labs, and I never hit regen, and I just settled for movement speed. But ideally, you want movement speed here. Also, for Watcher's Eye mods, for cheaper mods, if you can't afford dot multi, which I didn't even end up getting a dot multi, I didn't have the money for it, and I'm trying to save for stuff. You could get Evade Chance, Regen, Watcher's Eye. Both those mods would be pretty solid for Watcher's Eye mods. I'm trying to think if there's anything particularly important I should go over with the tree. Most of the stuff is just like quality of life stuff. Until you get Corrupted Blood immunity on a Fragile Bloom or something. I got Corrupted Blood here initially. I get Curse reduction here, Curse reduction from our ring. Stuff like that ends up feeling pretty good. Hey, we made a sale. We are doing stuff. Pretty cool. Overall, pretty happy with the build. It's done well for farming content. I am trying to grind up some currency for this big project I got planned. I don't know if I'll be able to grind enough currency for what I have in mind, what I want to do, because I am pretty busy. As you see, the background is back at the house that I've been at for a while, because right now I'm working on getting it fixed up. I'm gonna meet with a stager in a couple days, and they're gonna tell me, hey, do this sorts of stuff to make it look pretty, stuff like that we got going on. So we'll see if I can end up doing the project I want to do in PoE. That may or may not happen. But anyways, that's the Righteous Fire Trickster. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Sorry I can't recommend it as much as I recommend Inquisitor. I just think Inquisitor is the better Righteous Fire pick. Trickster's got some stuff going for it. If you want to do something different, you want to do ES based, try it out. It's pretty solid. I was able to do all the content with it. I enjoyed it. Has some perks, feels good mapping, and yeah, that's the build. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.